videotape it, so we're also going to just check and see if we're getting this all set.
Hi.
Set. Hi, everyone.
Brad just photo
Nobody do any rude gestures.
Yeah, there will be no naughty videos, no rude gestures, no knucklehead behavior while we're doing the video.
So otherwise, don't be yourself.
Right?
Be someone else.
So
Well, Steve's not here, so.
Well, that's a good point. So a couple of months ago, I approached Felicia because I wanted to have this class. I went to a closing with a new agent. And, you know, every time I go to a closing with a new agent, things just seem to go well, which is awesome. But then I worry when I don't go to closings with agents, or even if you're not under 2 years of experience and I don't go with you, what could happen at a closing that might go wrong? And so I sat down and I wrote down all of these ideas like, okay, what might go wrong? And met with Felicia and Tiffany. These guys at North American Title are amazing. And so they've actually created this class, which I really appreciate based off of some of the, hey, this is something that might go wrong. And so I'm going to chime in a little bit, but Tiffany really is going to be the one that talks to you about things that she has seen, real life experiences, and what to do if it does happen. And so, you know, you may not encounter, I'm hoping, that you will never encounter what we're going to talk about today.
If you do, there's a solution.
Right, and if you do, that's part of the class, is obviously figuring out what happens next, okay? So our partners at North American Title, you guys, right? Is this one of the nicest lunches we've ever had?
Yeah.
And they are just so great, and I know many of you work with them. If you don't work with North American, you should be, because they have top-notch closers, top-notch service. Felicia, I'm just gonna give a pitch to Felicia, not only because she's our favorite North American Title, but also because she is ranked, yeah? Can I say that?
Yeah, you can.
So as a sales rep in the entire state of Colorado, let's see if I can get this, in the entire nation, let's just do that one first, top 20.
Within North American Title.
Within North American Title, right? That's just like the
Disclaimer.
award that we got from Ari, right? Like you can tell, like she gets after it and really is interested in being a partner with you in your business. So, and I think she's #1 in the state.
Yes, thank you.
Nice.
I have to say, with Greeley, with even our values, they're great for our community, but when you look outside of the values, like in Boulder County or even Fort Collins, the values are higher, so that means more transactions for Greeley than it is the dollars. So that's a huge kudo to our Northern Colorado office. So, yeah.
So I'm going to turn over to Felicia. She's going to take the time to introduce Tiffany and her credentials and those kinds of things, and then we'll get started on the closings gone wrong. Thank you for creating this class. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I just wanted to give a quick shout out. Contemporary Cook is the one who provided the lunch for us today, and they asked if I would just make a little plug for them. They are having what they call a Blue Cafe, and Blue Cafe is where in the evening on Saturday, March 21st, doors open at 5. They're having blues music starting at 6, and it's $10, and it's lasagna dinner and music, and they're a really quaint setting. So if you've ever been they're over by Roma's and that Outriders, and
It's not a very large venue, so.
it's not.
It'd be very.
It's very quaint.
Yes,
Yes, it's very intimate. So, and it is, it says all ages are welcome. Seating is very limited. They're serving lasagna, salad, and garlic bread. Drinks include lemonade and water, and you can BYOB, so bring your own booze over the age of 21. That kind of makes it sound like it's Salt Lake City, but
If I need beer with
they
it,
wanted me
yes.
to pitch
I mean,
that
I'm just saying.
for them, so they are wonderful. And if you eat in there, they also give you free ice cream. They have the best shakes too. I'm Felicia. I'm with North American Title. North American Title has been in Colorado since 1993. We are a prime A rating financial, not a bank, but a financial service. We do all closings. We're a full title service, from water closings, that's kind of Tiffany's niche in our office. She does water closings, residential, refi, commercial, land, development, raw land, you name it. And if you're not quite sure if we do it or not, you can always ask. We are located at 1711 61st Avenue over in the Fox Run Business Park. So if you haven't seen us, come over and see us. We've been there for a year. We've been in Greeley for 14 years now. So the closers, Tiffany is our Weld County senior escrow manager. Never know if it's escrow officer / manager or.
Really doesn't
She's
matter.
been in the business since she was like 10.
Also since 1993.
Also since 1993. When she was 10. And we have a real solid, just a solid group of people that work in our Greeley, Loveland, and Fort Collins office. We also have Robin Dowdy. She's a closer that came over in North American Title. This is 9 years we've been
Our 10th,
together.
10th.
Oh, 10 years we've all been together. I've been at North American Title for 11 years, but Tiffany and Robin and Tina in the office, they came over 10 years ago, and we've just been solid ever since. We added a new team member to our team, LaJune Pearson. She was at another title company. She's been in the business for over 30 years. She's not 10. She's well, no, LaJune. She's 20. I think we are all just passionate where we work. So doing things like this, we love it. And anytime we can educate you and become a resource for you, that's what we do best. The closings just kind of happen because we just love what we're doing, and I think it shows. And if you've worked with Tiffany, Robin, or LaJune, and Tina, you sense that. So I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany and let her talk about how closings go wrong, but we fix that. That was perfect.
Yes, that's one of those things.
A great reminder to turn your cell phones
I
on
know.
silent.
Oh, perfect. I guess I'll be back.
If you can, I will be having a drawing. I do have some great prizes. So if you can just leave your business cards, and I'll just kind of, or if you want to like push them to the ends by Megan and Mike, and then I can collect them, that would be great.
Megan, is it okay for her to sit? You got it
Will
on
you be able to see?
Will you be able to see me? Way
I
down
can,
here?
I can fix it,
Way down
yeah.
at the floor.
So I think oh,
Sorry, I forgot. I just wanted to tell you what a title company's role is, because some of you are new, and I just wasn't sure, it's like, okay, well, why do we need you except for our closings? We are a disinterested third party. So even though the seller and the listing agent hires or chooses, for the most part, chooses the title company anymore, our contracts say it's negotiable. But usually what we see is the sellers and the listing agent. We work for both parties and the lender, so we're a disinterested third party. And I think that's really important for people to understand, especially if you're working with buyers and you're working with us, that we're not taking the side of just the listing agent and protecting just the sellers. It's our role to be that disinterested third party, making sure that all realtors involved and the lender are communicating to us. We're kind of like the mediator and making sure all the information is balanced, basically. So sorry, I wanted to
That's
explain
okay.
that and I forgot.
that's okay. So again, I'm Tiffany, and I'm gonna do things a little bit backwards, because I wanna know if you guys have any, particular situations, issues that have come up. And I wanna be sure to get those addressed before we get to our 1 o'clock hour. So is there anything in particular that you've come across or heard, or anything with issues in closings that you have a question about?
I think really the biggest thing is when we're sitting at the table, and then the fit hits the sham. Like, that's the biggest thing that like, so how are we supposed to?
Yes. Can you be more specific about what fit it is?
The
Because
fits could be
I have
like-
2 pages of fits.
Well,
We
you know,
should just jump into those.
Yes, yeah, I can
that's
just do
probably
that.
really
Okay.
not what I'm looking for,
Okay,
but,
perfect.
you know, not working anymore at the same job.
Oh,
the buyer.
yeah, okay.
I'm sure you've seen that before.
Yes, I have. Yeah,
So,
okay, we'll start with this
Stuff
one.
like that.
Yeah, well, that's at the end of your closing, you're not selling. So one of the things you wanna, definitely advise your buyers, about when you're first getting into this, and hopefully your lender's doing the same thing, but, you know, you don't wanna assume, because you know what that does. make sure you're educating your buyers, don't go get a loan, don't go buy new furniture and put it on as 0% financing for 2 years. They don't even be making any kind of credit transactions. Don't tell them to freeze the credit card until you're done. They have to keep their job. I have literally had people come to closing and lenders are now checking credits the day of closing, and they are checking your employment the day of closing. So if your buyer has lost their job or quit their job, you are not gonna close. It is very unlikely that the lender's not gonna find that out. So
But what if
that's,
they don't? So like, what if your client leans over to you and the lender has not done a VOE, a verification of employment, and they say, oh, hey Jenny, I just lost my job 5 minutes ago. What would you recommend that the agent do?
I would be, you know, I
Go
would.
to the bathroom and change.
You better disclose.
That's something I would recommend.
I always err on the side of caution, and honestly,
You should tell.
I would tell.
Yeah, you should tell. So if your client calls you an hour before closing and is crying and has lost their job, you need to tell the lender. It's loan fraud, right? I mean, if that client is, and you have to say, I'm so sorry, but we need to tell the lender because this is, you know, it's a change in your employment, it's a change in your ability to repay the loan, and then stop the closing, right? And that's gonna be, that doesn't I mean, John Valencia at the Barnes Farmer mentioned that he had that happen to him, but that was one of the hardest situations he's dealt with. But if you know of something that's changed, you gotta stop the transaction, okay? Which is gonna be really hard for you, like, well, what's the big deal? The big deal is that their whole financial picture has changed with the loss of a job.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And you're doing a disservice to your client too, because they're most likely not gonna be able to repay that loan, being in a really bad situation, so. Excuse me, I'm not contagious, but I just so one of the biggest things that happens is we get to the closing, especially with early morning closings, and we don't have a wire. It's very typical. And with all of these situations that I'm gonna go through, the biggest thing is to maintain your cool. Keep, you know, things can be a big deal, but if you start to panic, you know it's gonna roll downhill, and your people are gonna, it is, your people are gonna panic. And most situations we're gonna come across are just either a waiting game, or there's gonna be a solution. We just all have to work together. And by you maintaining your ability to,
Keep calm.
keep calm, yes, your clients are gonna feel comfortable and they're not gonna get, excited about the situation. So the wire doesn't come in on time, very common. All we'll have to do is just sign a little escrow instruction saying, we're gonna fund as soon as we have the money from the lender, or it could be the buyer's funds we're waiting to come in by wire, or seller's funds if that's the situation. It's really not a panic time. We just want to figure out, number one, possession. That's usually always the question that's asked. That's really between the parties, you know, how do you feel about possession, if they've got a truck waiting, that kind of thing. And you need to let your seller know or your buyer know that we aren't going to disperse anything. We aren't going to record that deed. We're going to do nothing with the documents until we have our funds and they in fact have their funds. So that's a lot of sellers often panic about that, leaving the table without their money. That's why you're entrusting us, the third party, to escrow that money, escrow the documents, and they're not recorded until everything's been dispersed.
So then do you have a form there at
We do.
closing
Mhm.
for pre-occupancy?
No, we do not have those types of.
I know we do.
Yeah.
We
But
sure
then-
do,
but
so
then-
call your assistant and say, we need a pre-occupancy agreement or something like that so that you can, you know, whatever you've negotiated or post-occupancy.
And have everybody sign
Okay,
while they're there at the
And have
table.
everybody sign that at the table.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So, one thing I always get asked is, when do you think the wire's gonna come in? And I really have no idea. I really don't. A bank can push a button and send a wire and we'll have it in 10 minutes. Most banks have certain times that wires get sent in. We don't know what those times are. Could be 10 and 2, could be 12 and 3. And just depending on the day, if it's a busy closing day, Fed day, It could take a couple hours to get there, so you can ask us that question, but we're gonna tell you, we don't know. And then I also get asked, do you think we're really gonna fund? Well, I'm not gonna go to the closing table unless I think we're gonna fund. So if I've spent my time to go to the closing, I think we're gonna fund. So I'm just waiting for the wire, so don't panic. That's easy. And a lot of times you're going to another closing, so you might be depending on that wire for their funds. We're gonna work with you to make sure your people get their money. We'll bring the cashier's check over, we'll wire it, we'll do what it takes on our end to help your client get in the end what they need to.
We deliver checks to other title companies made out to them, so everything's ready to go
Yeah,
for that next closing.
yeah, don't hesitate to ask us. We are here working for you and your client, okay?
It's that communication, is that they can let us know what's happening.
Yeah. And that
They
is
should
fully
both be
needed.
there at North American Title, so it wouldn't be an issue.
That's right.
what's
They
that?
should both,
They should
both
both be-
transactions.
Oh, well, they should, that is right, that's
The
right.
sell and the purchase.
Do you
Deborah.
recommend that we tell our clients to wire the money a day ahead?
You know, it doesn't hurt, if you have those figures and they're comfortable doing that, I think it's great. Especially if you're talking about Wells Fargo, and I don't mean to bash on anybody, I'm not fake bashing, but Wells Fargo oftentimes takes more than 24 hours to get a wire out. So, as soon as you have figures and as soon as your person feels comfortable, I wouldn't wire it 2 weeks early, but a day or two is great. That is great.
I worked at a bank and we have customers come in and we have a 3 o'clock wire deadline.
Mhm.
And they come in at 4
Mhm.
demanding a wire and
Right.
there's nothing we can do.
Yeah, right, and there's not, you know, and we understand that, you know. And while we're talking about wires, you know, and this is gonna be changing, I don't know when it's gonna be changing, but right now, cashier's checks are good funds. However, cashier's checks are not collected funds. So even if your client brings us a cashier's check, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a valid cashier's check. Number one, it could be forged. They can go to the bank and say, I lost that, put a stop payment on it. There are all sorts of fraudulent situations with cashier's checks. And that is why a lot of title companies, I think we were the first to start, require wires for cashiers, or for funds over $25,000, and then for any cash purchases. Because once you purchase a property with cash, we have no recourse really, except to place a lien. So when you have a loan, there is some recourse for the title company. We're putting our finances out there. So you have to remember that if that cashier's check isn't good, we're on the line for that money. We've promised the seller we are giving them good funds. So that's why we're such sticklers about that. There will be, in the next year or so, a complete going to wiring of funds, period. We're just kind of we were the first to have a fraudulent cashier's check issued to us. So of course, we jumped on the bandwagon right away. And the $25,000 is just kind of what we have set up as a okay risk. So it's not a mandated thing right now. That's just what we feel like is a risk that we can take. So that's where that number comes from. I get asked that all the time. So that's where that is. So I know people are hesitant to wire funds, but it truly is the safest way to send your money. If you have a cashier's check for $50,000 and you lose it, you are out of luck. You're out of luck. You can't, they're not gonna, they wait, I wanna say 6 months before they will reissue you a cashier's check.
It's 90 days.
Is it 90 days? Okay,
But still,
90
that's
days,
still
okay.
Still
It is a
kills
long
the
time,
deal.
because you're talking about your house, sorry, I had a drummer. I have something. My mom don't. So any questions about wires?
Can I just say one more thing about if the wire doesn't come in as a reminder? It's technically not a consummated transaction. So I've gone to like an Oliver Frascona class, and he said that sometimes people, listing agents, especially in the market that we're in now with it being so hot, that they'll often wait and see if the wire doesn't come in and then put a backup, like, sorry, we're not gonna sign that escrow agreement. You know, so you wanna make sure, like, we're not gonna sign the escrow agreement because, hello, we have the backup contract in the wings, that's cash, that's ready to close right now. So, you know, that probably is highly unlikely that it would happen, but, you know, you do wanna work with the lender and with the buyer about getting those funds on time, you know, and so if you're nervous about that, I wouldn't schedule an 8 AM closing. You know, Tiffany was talking about early morning closings, like, schedule closings for between 10 and 2 or 10 and 3,
Yeah.
like, or a 4 o'clock closing, you know, if something's gone wrong at the bank, they can't do anything with the wire after 4 o'clock. And so, just be careful. I just want you guys to be clear as real estate agents, that if the money isn't there, it's not legitimately, they don't have to close. That's what the contract says in section 4 of the contract, so.
Absolutely.
Once you're waiting on the wire, what could go wrong from it coming through?
From it coming through?
Yeah.
Really, once it's been released, the only really thing that could happen is that it's tagged, the terrorism, and I can't remember there's an acronym for it, but I can't remember. But that's really the only thing, once it's been released, that could really
Okay.
stop that. And if you,
Sometimes credit unions, cause they're coming from a different servicer, is the only thing, and like when we're checking the wires and stuff, it's from a different bank. I've just heard some of the closers say, oh, wait, it's
yeah,
a credit union.
right, yeah, they
So the
use
money
an
might be there, it's
intermediary,
just a-
yeah, there's an intermediary bank used there, so, yeah, that can happen. And, you know, we can get the wire, and we can have everything ready, and again, if a credit is pulled, or somebody loses their job, that doesn't, you know, just because we have the money, doesn't mean we can file it, so.
I don't know if I'm just being lazy or not, but I think putting my buyer in direct contact with you, for instance, in regards to the wiring instructions and everything else, they feel more comfortable talking to
Absolutely.
you. I mean, you know, with an agent, your eyes are kind of glazed over a little bit, but they feel so comfortable talking to the title
Absolutely.
company direct, and
Oh, yeah.
And the job will get done. Don't
Yep.
try to, you know, as an agent, don't try to be the expert in everything. It's
Oh,
just,
absolutely not, yeah, I don't try to do your job, so, yeah, don't try to do mine.
like I said, it's kind of lazy.
No, I mean,
Because
that's
I'm
not, because, you know, it is scary sending a wire, especially when you're sending, you know, your life savings, or, you know, your last 5 years savings, it is scary, so absolutely, don't hesitate to call. We know how sensitive people are about their money, so we totally understand that, so.
And the title company is the one that would do the escrow instructions, the escrow agreement. We don't have those forms, that's what the title company would do, so.
Yeah, so we do, yep, exactly, we do prepare those. So while we're on wires, let's just transition to funding numbers, and everybody hates sitting at the table. So it's really become a real concern with lenders, that most lenders are now requiring us to send a stack of documents off and waiting to get, approval, just saying, yes, you can release our funds. And the reason why they're doing that is because they are now, if they are missing anything out of their investor package, that investor can say, nope, I am not buying this, and now you service this. And so most lenders that we're dealing with are just intermediaries, they're just brokers. So they're initiating the loan, somebody else is actually buying it from them, so they don't really have the capital to service that loan. So if they screw up, or we screw up, and we don't have something in there, they may not be able to sell their loan, and so their capital is used up in a loan that they now have to service, and probably don't have a servicing department set up to do that. So that's why those are so important, and that's why as closers now, we're just getting really anal about it too. Used to be, oh, yep, everybody signed, you know, they signed right, they dated right, everything is good. Well, sometimes we'll send out things and they'll, oh, well, we forgot to send you this explanation letter, and we needed those tax returns signed, and maybe the date looks like, I mean, I've had crazy things, it looks like a 3 instead of a 2, so you have to go back, change it in initial, and so be patient with us, but also know you don't have to wait. If you need to go, just be aware that your client or you may have to come back and sign something. But, you know, really, you don't have to wait. But we can't fund, we can't pass out the money in most cases. There are a couple of lenders that will let us fund, but those are getting fewer and fewer. So, yeah, if you guys are on a tight schedule, just say, do you mind if we go? We can come back if you need anything. So just let us know. We're really easygoing about that, because especially on the last day of the month when it's really busy, or really any day of the month, doesn't matter anymore.
Fridays.
Fridays.
This week it was
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yeah, but it's gonna be today when we'll get back, let me know. So anyway, we can't sit there either, so just let us know. But that's why we're so funny about it, we don't wanna make you sit, we just, we don't wanna get crosswise with those lenders, so, we're their clients too, they're our clients, so we work hand in hand, so. So that's what those are all about.
Or just don't schedule closings back to back, right? I would actually encourage you to wait.
Oh,
for
I
it.
would too, yeah.
You know, so if you have a closing, your seller's closing at 1 and they're gonna close again, maybe schedule 1 o'clock and then 3 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock and then you're waiting. It gives you a little bit more time, in between closings, and then you can have a cup of coffee at the title company and wait for the funding, and then your client's not running back and forth if they did miss something. I would actually, as nice as Tiffany's being with your schedules, I would just say wait, like stay there and wait until everything is satisfied, right?
Yeah, if you could, yes, and I always suggest that, cause you just never know what is gonna delay it, and you don't want it's stressful enough, but, time crunches always stress people out, so. And then being late to the next title company, that's gonna throw them all the way, they're gonna be off, and, it's a vicious circle, so just keep that in mind when you're scheduling those. So, let's just say that you go to do your walkthrough and there's a door missing, or a window out, or there's water, you got 3 feet of water in there, what do you do? So, tell us all, I'll start with, you start, and then I'll tell you what we can do on this on my end.
So my encouragement would be for you to do a walkthrough as close to the closing as possible, like an hour before the closing or right before the closing, so that you can ensure that the condition of the home is in the same condition that you saw it in when you put it under contract. Now, if there's something wrong, on your way driving to the title company, for example, there is water in the basement, or there's a door that was removed, or somebody vandalized the property, you need to be calling the listing agent if you're the buyer's agent and let them know, like, hi, we have a problem, right? That there is a situation, and sometimes it's a remedy, you can remedy the situation at closing. Let's say the seller accidentally took a refrigerator. Like, I forgot that it was included. Well, we can probably address that at closing with some type of, the seller is going to reimburse the buyer for the refrigerator or something like that. But if there's like 6 inches of water in the basement, not so much, right? I mean, that is a huge, could be an insurance claim or something like that, and you may not be able to close. So, but you need to get on the horn with the listing agent as soon as possible before you actually sit down at the closing table like, well, hello, we just want to let you know we have a problem. You got to address those things, and like Felicia was saying, communication is really key about this. Don't wait until after the closing to do your walkthrough. This is why we do not encourage post-occupancy and pre-occupancy agreements, right? Because there's no leverage. So if your client, the seller, for example, waits for 3 days to deliver occupancy of the property, now there's nothing to leverage, i.e. a closing, if something's wrong, okay? It's, just as much as you can avoid pre and post occupancy, it's just better to exchange those keys that once and be done with it. So you do need to address it, and here's the thing, you guys, if it's a big issue, you may have to go back to the start. You may have to not only, go back to go, do not pass go, you gotta start over, but there could be things that affect the loan. So it can't be just like, oh, well, we'll give you $3,000 for all the missing doors. That's gonna be a price reduction, it needs to be on the HUD. Your clients should not be writing checks, large amounts of checks at the time of closing. Why? To each other. What's that called?
Loan fraud.
Thank you, Farah. Loan fraud. It's a side agreement, right? It's not on the HUD, and so you want that disclosed. So, oh, no problem, I'll just give you a $500 check for the refrigerator. Technically, I know that happens at closings. It's not really totally legitimate, right? Because you're giving something of value, i.e. money, to the client, and the lender was relying on the fact that that refrigerator or air conditioner unit or whatever was already going to be in the property. It's sticky, and really do not skip out on your walkthroughs. Make sure you go, for sure, okay?
Absolutely.
Are there any questions about the real estate side of that? Tiffany's gonna talk a little bit about probably about the title side of that. Oh, you're scared now?
With the water, if there's water in the basement type thing, that would be, and you wanna terminate,
You
on
would,
the buyer side, if
it
you
would
wanna,
be a terminated, it would be under what clause, Brad?
well, the walkthrough clause.
There's the walkthrough clause, section 19 of the contract, the walkthrough clause says, if the property has been damaged, does anybody remember what percentage it is? More than
50?
10%. So if the basement was flooded significantly, like more than you think, this is a $100,000 house and there's $30,000 worth of water damage, that would be more than 10% of the value of the property, you could cancel the contract under the walkthrough agreement. Now, could you cancel the contract because somebody didn't patch all of the holes from where they hung their frames or their pictures?
No.
Probably not. You know, that seems like normal wear and tear. Furthermore, it's not more than 10%, you know, that's a problem. But the 10% issue comes up, you know, when we had the hail damage properties, when we had that huge hailstorm last summer, nightmare. I mean, it was because people were waiting for insurance checks and they had submitted to insurance, and it was really problematic because some of those checks were like $40,000, $50,000 because it was all their siding and their roof and, you know, all kinds of things. So it can happen. You know, we had floods a few years ago, so they're like literally not just a basement flooding, but the floods. So gotta be careful. Yeah, Kim?
So if it is less than 10% and you just wanna postpone the closing until it's remedied, I mean.
You could. Yeah, that might be a solution. So we still wanna buy it. The seller's gonna submit it to insurance. We're gonna get people in to mitigate it. That would be fine as long as the seller's agreeable to that, right?
What if they're not?
If the seller was not agreeable to fixing the work, you're back at what we go through all negotiations. Yes, no, or maybe, right? So seller says, yes, I'll fix. What does that look like? No, I'm not fixing. Cancel the contract maybe. Or maybe I'll fix, I'm gonna pay for half and you pay for half.
But if all, I'm just playing devil's advocate,
Sure,
sorry. But
sure.
if all loan condition was a week ago,
Yep,
all conditions were a week ago,
yep.
and it's less than 10%,
You could still, even if it's less than 10%, you could still cancel if the house is in, I should go get a contract so I can read it to you. If the house is not in the same condition, like for example, let's do the refrigerator one. If the refrigerator, an inclusion that's in the contract, was not in the property, technically, your buyer could cancel. They could technically cancel because it's not, you know, that was part of the contract and it's not actually in the property any longer. I don't think people would do that. But if a seller wanted to be a total jerk, they could, and maybe the buyer wanted to enforce the contract, what does that look like?
not performing the contract.
Right, so the buyer, how would the buyer force that contract? This is Stump the Broker 101, right? Let's go see Judge Judy, right? That's a specific performance clause to say, we still wanna buy it, you're held to that it's 10% more and you have to fix this, right? Or 10% less. I mean, you still have to fix it into the condition of the same condition when we had under contract. The challenge is that the only remedy for the buyer is to sue the seller to force the contract. So you have to decide, your buyer has to decide, is this worth it? Maybe, right? It might be totally worth it to say, but this is where you guys, this is where the rubber meets the road and you earn your money. This is where negotiation happens, right? Where you say, hey, we can make this work. There's no right, we can figure out this refrigerator issue or the water, or the buyer still wants to buy, the seller still wants to sell. How do we figure out a solution for it? But it can be nerve-wracking when it's a big issue like that, so.
And it's right before your closing.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, and you find out 10 minutes before you're supposed to close, like, oh my God, there's 5 inches of water in the basement, that's a little, so. Any other questions on the walkthrough? Tiffany probably has some, do you have some suggestions on that? What's the
You're
worst,
lovely.
what's the worst
Lovely.
one you've ever seen?
Like a walkthrough issue, or,
Yeah,
well,
walkthrough issue where it was like, oh my God.
there have been the water issues,
We
a
just
lot,
had one that
yeah.
was a water issue.
Yeah, or people not lagoons that it was a commercial property
Yeah,
and
it was a
the,
drive.
seller left all sorts of dangerous fluids in there, things that they were supposed to remove, so.
That was a serious one.
I wasn't gonna say that, but yeah.
Now that I
So,
know, I know.
the buyer terminated the contract. I mean, there, you know, he had a lot of things that he would have to take care of that, you know, I mean, EPA things that, you know, you just can't go toss out dry cleaning fluid, you know, so they terminated the contract, and they were, I mean, in my opinion, absolutely should have, so I think that
But
maybe.
it got nasty at the closing.
Oh, yeah,
because
it
there was
did.
no communication
It got very ugly.
prior to.
It did, yeah, it came to the table and then it was disclosed, so that's really hard. It's really hard for us to be in that position too, because it's uncomfortable. I mean, honestly, it's uncomfortable for us, and we don't know, we can't do anything for you, like, in that situation, you know, we just look dumb and like,
We leave the room and let you guys hash it out.
that's right, that's exactly what.
We lock you in a room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
All we
Never
can
comes
say
out.
is, would you like some coffee? I want some cookies. So,
Just as a reminder, that's a good point to bring up. Your closer is not the mediator and they're not the negotiator. So while they can help you come up with ideas about that, you know, I've seen it resolved such and such way, they're not the ones that are gonna say, oh, come on, you guys, let's figure this out. That's really your jobs as real estate agents at the time of closing to figure out what can be workable if all the parties still wanna buy or sell.
no,
They postponed.
yeah.
Yeah, I just asked Tiffany if the water one, if they closed in, escrow, and, but they postponed. The damage was more than
Yeah,
they thought.
Can I just read, I pulled up the contract, I just wanted to read the walkthrough clause, cause I did remember it is section 19, that was very good, thank you so much.
Very good.
But it says, in the event that the property or the inclusions are damaged by fire, other perils or causes of loss prior to the closing, in an amount of not more than 10% of the total purchase price, seller is obligated to repair the same before the closing date. So if it's under 10%, they have to repair it. If it's over 10%, it also says buyer has the right to terminate on or before closing date if the property damage is not repaired before the closing, or if the damage exceeds 10%. So the seller is not obligated to fix it if it's over 10%. However, if it is under 10%, they're obligated under the contract. Now, if they refuse, like Brad's saying, I'm just playing the devil's advocate, that looks like go see Judge Judy, Mike's favorite person.
And then it's, what do you consider 10% to be, so.
Right, yeah, is it 10%, yeah, is it 10% out of pocket, is it 10% of insurance cost? I mean, I think there's, you know, some gray area, but that at least gives you a little bit of a feel about what that looks like, so. Okay.
Okay, so if we have something that's, you know, there's a broken window, there's, you know, new construction, you know, the backsplash isn't finished, the door's missing, there you were supposed to remove a dog door. I mean, if there's any number of things, escrow for repairs that are just pretty minor things, but, you know, the seller has promised it in this condition and it's not in that condition. So what we can do for you at closing is do an escrow for repairs. And what that would look like is you need to get a bid, or you need to tell me what the buyer thinks is a fair, and I think it's the buyer's, in my opinion, buyer needs to know what they think would be a fair compensation if, worst case scenario, the seller doesn't perform and fix this issue, if you don't have a bid. We will generally, if we have a bid, we're gonna escrow 1.5 times that bid. We just have to do that because, as we all know, contractors will tell you one thing and do another. So that is what typically all across lenders, all across the industry, it's 1.5% times the bid amount. So the things that you need to tell us is how much I need to escrow or provide me with a bid. How long I can hold an escrow. I can only hold an escrow for a very certain time period. We don't want to hold escrows for a year. That's not what we do. This isn't an escrow state like that. We don't do that. So we need to have a time frame, and then we need to know what if the seller doesn't get that done? What do we do? Who does the money go to? So if they were supposed to replace a door, and you're giving them 2 weeks to get that done, and it doesn't happen, what do I do with that escrow money? You have to tell me that. And we'll write that in the, if seller doesn't perform, then they get that money, the buyer gets that money. I'm escrowing 1.5 times, and there is not a bid. But you don't feel like all of the money should go to the buyer if it doesn't happen. You need to just let me know exactly what the terms are. So, with the bid, usually, again, the overages is pretty easy, it's just gonna go back to the seller. But I need those specifics, because there's all sorts of scenarios, so be very specific with me. We can write up the agreement, and everybody will sign it. It's not my responsibility or our responsibility, anybody's title company responsibility to go back and make sure the work is done. You need to let us know who needs to approve the work, and I would generally say the party that would be, I don't know what the word is.
Benefiting.
Yes, yes. So, so generally, if I'm not provided with an invoice, I need to know from somebody, is the work done and is done to your satisfaction? An email's generally sufficient, okay? And I don't know if you have certain
Do
criteria.
lenders usually let you do escrow for repairs?
They do. They do. If it's major, they're gonna wanna know about it, and that's gonna come across in like an inspection or the appraisal and that kind of issue. So they're gonna generally, they're gonna point us in what direction we need to go there. And a lot of times now, the lenders are holding that escrow money because they have an interest in this property. And if it's not complete, if it's not whole, then they're losing their collateral. They're losing a portion of their collateral. So now they're wanting to be the holders of that escrow. And that, especially when we're talking about roofs, water damage, things like that, that are really, really monetarily up there in value. So, but yes, generally lenders do. If it's if it's something major, we are obligated to let them know that. Because as a title company, we have fiduciary responsibility to them too. If we know something about the property that doesn't make it a value, we have to let the lender know. And that's in our closing instructions. So we have that responsibility as well.
We've held escrow for things like even where the house is left disgusting.
Oh,
There's been a
Dirty.
cleaning service that the other realtor said, we're not moving in unless it gets cleaned, and that cleaning service, so like an invoice or a estimate from the cleaning service. And so it's not just damage, but
And all parties have to agree. That's one of the things we've run across is the buyer says, this is what I want. And they, if the seller doesn't agree to it, we can't just do it. We just can't hold somebody's money because you said, And I understand, but we, like I said, we're that disinterested third party, so we have to be protecting both sides.
I have a question about closing occupancy agreements. So all parties signed it. It was agreed that $500 would be withheld from seller's proceeds by the title company as a security deposit.
Okay.
And so after closing, house was a disaster. My buyer decides, okay, I definitely want the $500 for the security deposit. So we did writing submit to the title company. They told us we needed signatures from the sellers as well. Is that true?
We really do.
Okay.
Yes, we really do. We are in.
See why we just don't like West Causing.
Yeah. We really do. Now, what would have been a better idea was to say specifically, if the house was in disrepair or if these things happen, and then have the buyer and seller sign that about the.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we are in. It's so hard, and I'm so glad you guys hold your own earnest money, because I tell you, it is hard for us because we cannot do anything with that money without buyers and sellers' permission, period, no matter what. As a broker, you guys can, or Chalice, or you can kind of decide, and your regulations, but we have one or the other option. It's either hold it or disperse it according to what's signed by buyer and seller. We have no other options. So that's where, in that case, I would have done the same thing. It sucks, but we just have to have very specific instructions, and that's why I always say, what if? What worst case scenario, we need to know what to do with that money. And that would have been a very good thing for that closer to do, so.
it's also important, I'm trying to think of all the different situations we've been in, for you to attend your closings, or to have someone,
What?
yeah,
I
oh,
know.
there.
I know,
Yeah,
it's
there's a
it's
lot of
crazy.
agents that, don't attend their closings, or that they're busy and they'll just come by, pick up their package later, or on Monday, and they're not there, so it's very, very important.
Yeah, you guys are horrified, but
Yeah.
it
Oh,
does
yeah.
happen. It does happen, and by
That
the
happens
way,
more than you know.
your independent contractor agreement and our policy manual says you or a agent representative of Sears must attend on your behalf, period. And you need to stay for the whole thing. Yeah,
And the
absolutely.
reason is because if something like this comes up, and if there's someone not there to represent that buyer or seller, and we're trying to get things finalized and signed, our hands are kind of tied, and it creates a bigger issue than what it really is.
So I'll tell you about, when I was first here, I'll tell you about one of the advanced challenge files that we have. These guys already know because we talked about it. The, client, our buyer, he was a naughty person, he's actually in jail now, asked our agent to leave the closing and wait out in the lobby or just leave in general. And she was like, well, this seems kind of weird, like, okay, like, why are you asking me to leave the closing? And was actually doing shenanigans during the closing that she could have been held liable for. And so she did, she was like, okay, I'll go sit out in the hall, like, she felt like, well, it's his closing, who am I? Don't ever do that. If your client asks you to leave the closing for some reason, there's something wrong here, right? And so just say, it's my responsibility to stay in the closing and make sure that you're getting representation. Well, I don't need you here. Yeah, I'd really like to stay.
You hired me.
You hired me to be here. Don't leave the contract. Don't leave the closing.
And if you need us as backup,
Right, I think the
Yeah.
closer would say,
Yeah.
yeah, it'd be really great to
Yeah.
have Dory in the
Yeah.
closing. It'd be really great to have Chalice there, like that. So,
What kind of shenanigans were they trying to do? Change?
they were doing under the table stuff like buying, paying this by, it was actually our seller, I'm sorry, paying the buyer things. The person's in jail now. I mean, they're giving him cash, they were doing certain things. So it's, and our, in some ways, I was happy maybe that our agent wasn't in it because, when we were at the DA's office testifying about this, it was,
I wasn't there.
I wasn't there, but just never do that. Never, if somebody asks you to leave a closing, there's something wrong here, right?
absolutely.
Absolutely.
And can I just interject, and do stay till the end, I have one with Robin where I had another closing, and so everything was signed and it was all fine, and I left and the wire didn't come in for 3 days. And thank goodness Robin looked at my seller and said, would you like to keep the keys or would you like to give them to the buyer? And he kept them and the buyers were PO'd, and I was like, oh my goodness, so I really stay to the end. I mean, even if you're late for the next
Yeah.
one, stay to the end.
Yeah, they'll wait for you on the next one.
Yeah.
And they
They'll probably have to.
they should. I would
Yeah.
never start a closing unless I knew it was okay with my realtor to start closing without them, so,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Another issue I've had is, one of the people doesn't come to closing, like the seller decides they don't wanna sell day of closing. It's really happened.
We've had it happen twice here.
Yeah.
So where you guys are laughing, but it is true.
Yeah, buyers come to closing, I've got the loan docs ready, we're just waiting on a seller. Your seller or your buyer, whoever didn't show up, they are not in performance. So as a title company, what we're gonna have you do, and it sounds so silly, is everybody write a little note. I was here at closing, March 5th, March 6th, at 7 a.m.
No.
5 a.m.
Yeah.
I'm not there at 7 a.m. But time, date, who's here, because you're gonna go to court. You're most likely gonna go to court, and we have to have documentation. So that's what's gonna happen in that situation, and you just need to counsel your buyer or seller. If you want this house buyer, you're gonna go to court. And they went to court and they got that house in that particular situation, so the lady was actually crazy, so.
Make sure, so what Tiffany's saying is, if you know it's still not gonna happen, like the listing agent calls you and says, uh-oh, we have trouble in Dodge, I don't think the seller's closing, and it's the day before closing, you say, we are still intending to close at 3 o'clock at North American Title, You still need to show up. Oh, they're not gonna show up. Okay, we will meet you at the closing table at 3 o'clock, and your buyers still need to
Show up.
show up. That's what she's saying, because then it's like, they're not now in default.
Right.
So if they don't show up, the seller says, well, the buyer didn't come to closing. Do you see what I mean? So that's really good documentation. Vice versa as well. If the buyer, you know, if the same thing on the seller side, if the buyer doesn't show up, still have the seller show up and document it, have somebody do a little note, the closer was prepared to do the closing on time, ready to go, so that you can prove whoever was in default.
If in some cases, and I think you and I had one of these, this is like 7 or 8 years ago, you know, the discount brokers who just, they're going to take a fee and they're just going to, they're not gonna do anything. I mean, for showings, you call the owner and, you know, the owner is supposed to, I mean, do everything. So you have to be a little bit more vigilant in making sure that seller is going to be there. Because half the time those discount brokerages, they're just sit back, won't show, they'll just wait for their check. And
Yeah.
so you really need to kind of know that seller a little bit too, beyond your buyer's expectations.
Yep, absolutely. Those are the worst. They're the worst to deal with. We kind of talked about disagreements between parties at the table. You know, we are not mediators. We're not equipped to do that, and we're not legally allowed to do that. We're not attorneys. We're not realtors. So excuse, if you need to excuse us, please excuse us, and feel free to work that through at the table. If you need an escrow agreement, if you just need advice, we'll be happy to give you advice, but like Chelsea said, we can't say, come on, Mr. Buyer, you really don't need that thing fixed, you know? We just can't do that. You know, it just puts us in an odd place, and we want the happy closing. So, with that, if you have parties that are not getting along, if you have a divorced couple selling, please let us know. We will be happy to accommodate seller closings. We don't want to be in that situation, and it really makes the other party very uncomfortable, especially for a buyer. If they're buying a house and the sellers are separating or just not getting along, it's brother and sister or whatever. Let's do that separately. We can even do the sellers separately, because this is a joyous day for the buyer. And if they walk away with this horrible closing and everybody, you know, you can cut the tension with a knife, that's not what you want for your clients, you know? So just let us know, work with us. We totally understand. Don't ever worry about asking for 2 separate closings. You know, we are more than happy to accommodate that. You know, nobody wants to be uncomfortable. And I've had a closing where we had to call the police because the man came with a gun, and I was at another title company, and was threatening us all, threatening his wife.
Had a gun?
Whoa.
Yes, had a gun. Told us he was gonna flee out the back and jump off of the balcony, and it was just, it was horrible. So, but had the wife not been there antagonizing him, it might not have been such a bad closing. So, please,
Well,
let
we
us
had
know.
one, it wasn't that extreme, but we just had one where the husband and wife were arguing, and even in the parking lot, he just continued to bash his ex-wife and was screaming and hollering where no one even felt comfortable to go out to their cars yet. So we all kind of just gathered and had coffee and just had to wait till he left. I mean, it was like almost a dangerous situation with his temper.
Like that one with the, sorry Flora, I'm gonna jump in really quick, like that one that we had where it got heated and it did fall apart, you know, the buyer and seller. Sometimes I think it'd be good if it starts to get heated to just say, would it be okay if we had a separate closing room? You know, so to pull your people apart so that you're not talking, you know, you're not negotiating in front of each other. It's like, it's okay, let's put the buyers in one room and the sellers in another room and try to simmer people down, because tempers can get wild and then it's hard to get things settled down again. And again, you guys, all of these scenarios happen so irregularly, but you want to be prepared, like, oh, I remember in that closings gone wrong class, get people separated into different rooms or different areas of the building so that you can negotiate it and not do it in front of each other. It's sort of like if you were having an inspection objection and you put everybody in the same room and said, well, let's just work this all out, may not be workable. You know what I mean? So use your negotiation skills and try to get people simmered down. And our agent actually, I thought she tried to do that fairly well from what she told me anyways, like, okay, let's just all calm down and, but it probably would have been better to have separate closings on that one, because they both had pretty good tempers, so.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Florida, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, if we knew things could go south way ahead of time, is there somebody we could have at the closing? I mean, definitely do them separate, but, I mean,
Like a
police officer or a
absolutely.
bodyguard or?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, who do we
Just let
call?
us know.
Not you,
Call
but
police
you go
officer.
that far.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've had to do that before, yep.
Like your client? Or
No.
or somebody else's client?
No, hopefully I never have to see
No,
that.
no, just, and that's,
Oh, this is going on, yeah, red flag.
I'm like, did you see me after class?
You're going to the principal's office. No,
Might be one of
yeah,
Randy's clients that you're helping.
Right, right.
Not yours.
absolutely. Just let us know. That is absolutely.
I'd rather always be safe than sorry.
Absolutely.
Cause you never know.
Yeah. And I have actually I have a friend who's a former police officer, and I've had him just come and sit in the lobby. Nobody really knew what he was there for, but
Okay.
that's what, plain clothes sitting there, reading the paper, they don't know. That way you're not agitating the situation, but we've got the situation covered.
Yeah.
Okay, yes,
And usually,
absolutely.
if they're your clients and there is some, friction between husband and wife or brother and sister if it's an estate or something, you've usually seen that eruption before
Yeah,
and you know.
yeah.
And so just play it safe. I mean, this isn't gonna be a first time offender.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's say we were at the closing table. This is kind of encompass a lot of things. But you're looking at the settlement statement, or we're looking at the loan documents, and something's wrong. Your commission's wrong, there's no earnest money on there, and the buyers put down earnest money. Everybody's name's spelled incorrectly. Stop right there. If the seller leans over, that's not my middle name at all. Stop. Just stop the closing. Those are things that are correctable right there at the table. But if we know afterwards, it's just gonna create a hellstorm for us. Look at your settlement statements when we send them to make sure your commissions are right, because, commissions are negotiable, and if something goes wrong, I know you guys might lower your commissions or pay for a home buyer's warranty, but I can't read your mind. So unless I'm told, unless you shoot me an email or something, you need to let me know. But if it happens at the table, if you just realize, and it does, I understand, I'm absolutely human too, just stop and let me know, hey, I noticed this isn't wrong. I'm not gonna be embarrassed, even if it's my mistake, I'm not gonna be embarrassed. I wanna make sure we're getting everything done correctly at the table, all of our closers do, and we wanna represent you fairly. So if we, make a mistake and don't find out till afterwards, we're not representing you fairly either, so we wanna do that. So, but check those commissions and check the earnest money, that's the biggest thing. 'Cause sometimes it says that, Sears is holding the earnest money and we're actually holding the earnest money, or it was a promissory note that had a date that it was gonna be redeemed, but it never got redeemed. And if we're not holding the earnest money, we don't know. So just, those are big things to check, big things to check.
Make sure to check your commissions. We've had a situation in the past where another agent at a different company changed commission on us at the close, like right before closing.
Yeah, as a
And,
buyer's agent, check your commission.
Yeah, as a buyer's agent, make sure you check, because we did go to Matt with her and got the full commission that she had represented in MLS, but thank goodness our agent had printed out the MLS sheet that said this is what you represented, and because she had changed it, wasn't it like a day before closing, and oh, now we're offering less. It's like, not when we were under contract. So, you might print your MLS sheets when you show the property so that you've got that on there, because we've actually had that happen a couple of times. So make sure that you're, what you represent, what you're being represented, that you paid, you're actually getting paid.
Yeah, I know at closing that can be embarrassing when it's your commission and you don't wanna go, hey, my commission's wrong, what? Yeah, in front of everybody, because I know people feel at the closing anyways, it's like, well, how much is your commission, how much are you making from me? And, that can be kind of a little tricky anyways, a little awkward. So even if you just walk over to the closer with the settlements and you
Just
go,
say, yeah,
I
can I see
think
you for a
there's an
second?
error right
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Great, here.
Yeah. I'm not gonna,
You might just mention that we do have a commission statement that our office has, and I do have that filled out when I'm the buyer's agent. I send it over to them. They may not reveal what their commission is, but at least you have their signature stating, this is my commission, this is what you have said.
It's
So
not
I
a
can use
required
it.
form, but if you're, especially if you're working with somebody you think, it's good to get that done. You know, so we do have one on the forms for it, if you're, you know, sort of nervous about what your commission might be.
and however, a little title company, what is our fiduciary responsibility there? We won't proceed to closing if that's the case, but we can't, if the selling agent says that's not what it is, we just have to go with brokers, you're gonna have to deal with this. The selling,
There's a discrepancy.
yeah, if the selling agent is who is paying you, so for us, as a title company,
That's a really great point.
that's,
Where does that dispute live, you guys?
Here amongst us.
Judge Judy.
It doesn't live with Judge Judy, actually. It lives amongst the agents, but what else could you do if you wanted to escalate it?
Grievance committee,
Not with the commission,
grievance.
grievance committee through Realtor Association, code of ethics violation. So, you could escalate it to that, or, have a grievance. Now, if the other party is not a Realtor, capital R, no grievance committee, they don't play by the same, homie don't play by those rules, right, Brad, right, yeah, put that in. So, grievance committee could be a way to get your commission, like with the one that I was explaining to you, we did threaten grievance committee, she was very happy to give us the full commission once we kind of visited about that. But you wanna make sure, like Tiffany's saying, that's not gonna delay closing. Your commission is not a reason, or your lack of commission is not a reason to not have the parties close. That's not your fiduciary responsibility is not to your commission check, it's to your buyer or seller, right? So we'll handle it for sure after the fact, but don't hold closing up because your commission is not wrong, okay? I mean, because your commission is wrong, right, or not correct. Aren't you glad you came?
Could the real estate commission get involved though if you got a copy of the listing contract and it was misrepresented that she was gonna split it half and half in the listing contract, and that's not what he or she did?
It's my understanding that the real estate commission really hesitates, in the realm of commission disputes. If you could prove that your buyer, we won't go down this rabbit hole too much, Jenny, but by the way, this is Jenny from Fort Morgan, she's from Coates Realty. We're just doing partnership with them. I think that a lot of you know we refer business out to Fort Morgan, and so we invited Jenny to come because they don't have trading opportunities like this out there in Fort Morgan. But if your buyer was harmed by the commission situation, i.e. they were gonna have to make up a reduction in your commission because of your buyer agency agreement, I think the real estate commission would be interested in that conversation. If it was just, Chalice didn't give me my full commission, she promised, blah, 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 I think they're less likely because it's just a dispute amongst brokers and not a harm to the public to get involved in that. I'm not promising that they wouldn't, but they sort of have their hands full with regular commission disputes, so. Yeah.
Good funds, I don't probably really need to talk too much about this, but buyer needs to have good funds. They can't write me a personal check for $7,000. I would love to accept it, but I'm not. Every title company kind of has a range of what they will accept in a personal check. North American Titles is $500, and I'm very strict with that. That is what we've just deemed as a reasonable risk, and I'm strict with it, And we don't accept cash. I don't know
Like
if
real
there's
green
any.
cash,
Yeah,
like real.
yeah. I have an agent.
Green cash, went by blue cash?
Yes, or cash,
Like check, cash, or money order for cash.
I had an agent
Okay,
that's been in the
so
business 25 years and told client to bring me $1,000 or whatever in cash. I can't take cash.
Why
I
is
can't do
that?
that. Well, number one, it's dangerous.
Yeah.
It's dangerous for an
Tiffany can
office
take it
of
home.
5 women to have cash laying
She
around.
would call
Number
it
two,
the
our
shop.
bank's in New York. I can't go to make a deposit. So that's why.
And number three, because it's not traceable, right, you guys? So like lenders don't like that because it's not sourced.
Oh, yeah.
There's not a source to it. It's like, yeah, I just sold my marijuana from my basement and I got the $500. Not so much. It's not sourced and seasoned about where your money's from.
Right.
Lenders do not like that either. So title companies are totally serious about the good funds thing. So how would you like us to give you money?
in a wire.
And if you have a cashier's check, so are you strictly only accepting wires now?
No, we'll accept a cashier's check if it is not, if it's a cash purchase, only wire. Cash purchase, only wire. If it's, one with a loan, we will accept a cashier's check up to $25,000.
And if they make a cashier's check, who should they make it out to?
Themselves.
No.
North American.
This has changed, right? So that's why I wanted to bring that up, Bill, because most title companies are not allowing you to make it to yourself any longer. You have to make it to the title company.
Because of this handy iPhone situation where you can just, or whatever, my Samsung, take a picture, deposit it, and you think, yeah, okay, well, they're gonna be caught and they're gonna catch up to you. But these people are not that smart. They don't realize that, they'll still do it, and it still takes money from us. We still have to put out money in order to get that money back. You know, we have to hire our attorneys, there's things, so it's just not willy-nilly things that we're doing, pulling out of our rear ends. Now, if you have a situation where you're closing at XYZ Title and you're gonna bring us a cashier's check, we want it made out to us, but it can say for business of, or North American Title and Jane and Tim Doe.
Okay.
So that is acceptable, but not just to them. Not just to them. Now,
You're right, so they can't sign it over to us anymore, like we used to be able
Right.
to have them endorse it.
not anymore. The other thing with cashier's checks is we cannot accept an out-of-state cashier's check for any amount of money.
Never. Not just North American, all
Yeah,
title
all title
companies.
companies. Yep, that's not, they're not good bugs. So keep that in mind. If there is a situation where you just have to bring in a cashier's check, you just have to. First of all, let us know, and if possible, bring that check in 24 hours before closing, so that we can get it through the bank, we can make sure it's good and it hasn't had a stop payment on it. If a cashier's check is issued the same day, more than likely, we cannot verify the validity of that check. People think you can, but we can't. We can call a number, they can say, you know, they might be able to say, yeah, it was issued, I think. They can't verify the check same day. So I've had arguments with people about that. Well, you can just call and verify. No, not if it's a same day issue, we can't. You know, your systems have to catch up with each other. So that's not the case. So just be in communication with your title company or closer about money. That's just where usually things go wrong at the last minute. And especially with last minute closings right now, you know, your buyer does have to bring in $50,000. You know, you roughly know what your buyer's gonna have to bring in. You do, you roughly know that. So have them wire that amount of money. Even if you wanna be a little short and they have to do a cashier's check for the difference, or we need to cut them some money back. It's just the best way to go. It baffles me when people go, well, we're closing in 2 hours and we don't know how much they need to bring. Well, you roughly know that. You know what their loan amount is. You know what their rough closing cost is. They've got a good faith estimate. You have a calculator, so you can roughly figure that out. So for me, I just feel like let's be forward thinking a little bit.
I think when they do you have to have the HUD statements 3 days in advance is gonna eliminate a lot of that problem as well.
Yes. Yeah, but it'll create so many. Yeah. I just did a class on that and it's terrifying.
Is that more of a liability if like we know, okay, it's gonna be right around $20,000, $21,000 they need to bring in. We just say, hey, you have the ability to put 22 in and then write back. Is that more of a liability for you guys than it is? Okay.
Not at
So
all.
just say, look, if you wanna get money back at closing,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if you don't want to be stressed and run into the bank to send a wire or get a cashier check, just send it.
Well, and we've run across even people that are new to the community and they're like, I don't have a bank connection here. I'm from California, we're just moving, and so it really alleviates some of
Yeah,
that.
it does. So yeah. One thing I definitely want to get in, and I've got a few more things, but if you have an out-of-state seller, there is this fun thing called a 1083, and it is a withholding for Colorado State. So if you have a seller who cannot answer the following questions, and we cannot can't question you if they're right or wrong. This is up to your buyers. You really can't advise, or your sellers, you can't advise them. Don't advise them, because this is tax consequences. If they have questions, have them talk to a tax advisor, their accountant, or H&R Block, or whatever. But if they need to be able to affirm they are a Colorado resident, or Colorado is their permanent place of business. This property that they're selling was their personal residence. Even if they're moving out of town, it was their principal residence, so that's okay. They can say that they have no reasonable tax estimated to be due to the county of, or to the state of Colorado because of a gain on the sale. So they can say, I don't think I'm gonna have to pay taxes. They can check that, that's fine, don't tell them to do that, but they can do that. If it's a sale by a partnership, an LLLP, an LLP, or there's no proceeds, or no net proceeds, they can check those things. If they're not, and I have, you just
Pass it around.
and the front page is a description of what happens. If they cannot check one of these boxes and affirm that, we have to hold 2% of the purchase price. The purchase price, not the proceeds, but the purchase price. And remit that withholding to the state of Colorado. Most times we remit it and it gets sent right back to the seller. But that's what we have to do. If we don't do that, if they can't check these, if we can't act according to these guidelines and we don't do it, we get fined a whole bunch of money. So that's what that's all about. And if you have an out-of-state seller, address this at the time of your listing. I get to the table so many times and they're like, well, I had no idea, that we would have to do that. We do, and it's uncomfortable for me, so, yeah. Cause, I don't always know your person is out of state, and that's another thing, fill out your contracts all the way, put everybody's address, phone number, email address. Wow.
What if say,
Forwarding address.
say someone's grandmother passed away, so they're coming here to sell it. Technically, it's theirs then, I guess, at that time? Because
No, it's the
most-
estate. It's the estate, so these questions would deal with the estate, if it's in their estate. Now, if they were joint tenants with grandma, then yeah, this would apply.
Okay.
Okay, so, yeah. Same thing with a foreign person, somebody who is not an American citizen. That's an even heftier price. It doesn't apply unless the purchase price is over $300,000. But if it is, 5% of the purchase price is given to the IRS to withhold. Period. There's no questions. If they're not American citizen, period. And one thing that we just came across was, Manny lives in Australia. He bought property, bought some lots here in Greeley, and he didn't have a social security number. And we have to report the 1099 if it's not your principal residence for 2 of the past 5 years. If it's, if you're single and it's over $250,000, or if you're married, it's over $500,000. There's other criteria. We have to report this to the IRS. If you don't have a social security number, we get fined about $10,000.
Wow.
So be sure they have social security numbers. That we had to hold this guy's proceeds for about 30 months, I think, for him to go through all of the rigmarole of working with the IRS and getting a tax ID number. So, and in this case, it's a tax ID number, not a social security number, but those are synonymous with it. So, let these things, this is
If you're
red
not sure, always
flags.
call.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
You may have said this, but what is the criteria for if that 2% withholding is held? How do they get that back?
They file they just need to file a Colorado state income tax form for the year that they sold the property.
So do you hold it, or you send it on to the
I have to
state?
send it to the state of Colorado.
And then the state of Colorado reimburses them?
Correct.
When they file their taxes?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
Yep, and I did not say that, thank you. So any questions on that, 1983? And they have to sign it. We've had people ask if they could just not, and you do, so. We have to tell the IRS everything.
Yeah, we've had people request, I prefer not to have a 1099. Yeah, but
Not a choice, sorry, to pay
You
taxes.
can tell it to all of us, we prefer not to.
Exactly, yeah. Real quick, if you have a reader We allot for an hour, but if they're true readers, it's gonna take them a long time. So just let us know, we'll try to coordinate getting them docs beforehand, or getting them a little earlier, putting them in a room, and they can write their questions out, and then we can answer them, so let us know. I've had attorneys at closing.
Oh, God.
I got a question, go back to the affirmation of Colorado real quick. So I had a client who was, just moved to Texas. Maybe this was his primary residence
Right.
type thing.
Right.
So would he have been able to select the affirmation of Colorado residency?
Principal residence.
The principal resident
Yeah.
residency?
Yeah,
Okay.
Colorado residency is usually if you're selling a, rental property or
He
something
just
like
did
that.
a mail out and it was one of those like,
What do I do? Yeah, because that was immediately
right.
his
It
principal
was, I
residence.
think it was like a week or two that was
Yeah.
different, but,
Yeah, and we still send these in that case, but we don't have to do the withholding.
okay.
So, right. So if somebody wants to red line the document, especially in a loan package, it's not gonna happen. If they wanna mark out things, it's not gonna happen. That's just a no-no. I've really had attorneys try to do that, and that's just, if you want this loan, this is what you're gonna sign, you know? And in our documents, our title company, we're kind of all inclusive. We're kind of encompassing every scenario, summarizing it in a document. So if there's things in there that doesn't apply to that particular situation and your person doesn't feel comfortable, just, well, that's probably okay, but let's talk about it, okay? I do have my special attorney in Fort Collins does that, and that's fine. But not loan documents, no. Let's talk about something showing up at the last minute. A lien shows up at the last minute, or your seller went and took out a bridge loan maybe to buy their house, and they didn't tell you they did this. This is gonna probably delay closing, especially liens. Liens are scary to us. That's where we lose the most money, mechanics liens, that kind of stuff with title companies. Because with a regular lien, they didn't make the credit card payment, it's gone to a collection agent, that kind of agency, that kind of thing we can go after them for. And it doesn't stick to title because they've already sold it. So we have a certain time frame that we feel like it's 2 weeks about, it's called a gap period, and we cover, if there is a lien placed against the property in that gap period, we will take care of whatever we need to do to make sure it doesn't fall against your buyer's house. Mechanics liens are scary because mechanics liens can be recorded and are valid up to, I should have brought this statute, 6 months after the work has been done. So we're like, we have to pay that. So one thing I would always suggest, that owner's extended coverage, check that, check it, it's $65. And if you have to have an ILC done, pay it, because if you don't get that you don't get that owner's extended coverage, we're not responsible. It's your buyer's problem. So, and I don't know if you guys were around during the Tuscany thing about 15 years ago. It was a complete disaster. There were buyers that had $20,000, $30,000 judgments against them because the builder and the developer weren't paying their bills, and they didn't need owner's extended coverage. So, so that encumbers their property, and they've had nothing to do with it. So that's $65, and even if, like I said, if you have to have an ILC done, which was, $250, $350 at the most usually, I think it's a good investment. I really do. So
We rescheduled that Title Commitment 101 class just in case you want to come and learn more about what Tiffany is talking about, how to read a title commitment and best practices. That's on March 20th from 10 to 11:30 here, so just FYI. Because we're going to talk a lot about OAC, like your knuckleheads if you don't get it.
Absolutely. When it more, in the contract, you can split the cost, you can.
Yeah, and it's $65. It's $65. That's crazy. Well, let's see. Let me think if there's anything. I think we covered
The
all
only
of
one
it.
that I wanted maybe to address is if you have a client that shows up and you feel like there's some kind of impairment or that they're incompetent. Like, what do you do if somebody shows up to the closing drunk, or on pain meds, or
Yeah.
they, like, you know, maybe they just had surgery and you feel like they're not totally competent to sign. I mean, I know we're laughing, but this does happen, and so I wanted Tiffany to maybe address that, because
Or even an elderly person
Right,
who's
elderly.
not in their right mind. We, as closers, cannot close. We can't notarize, we can't do that, and we will stop the closing, because then you're putting our jobs, these people, not you, these people are putting our jobs on the line, and we're there to make sure everybody's understanding what they're getting themselves into. So if we think somebody is drunk, we're gonna stop the closing, and that too has happened, you know? And, you know, your little old lady, if she's not incompetent, or competent, or incontinent,
That's different.
also with powers of attorney, you cannot have them sign a power of attorney if they're not competent. That's a legal document. So you kind of really need to know the situation you're getting yourself into, especially when you're working with their son or their daughter that's been your friend for years.
I had a situation like that in where I lived before. Married couple, wife was a raging alcoholic. And we had to wait until she was sober to sign even the listing agreement. And it was so difficult because she had really gotten bad. And so we had to bring the title person over to sign a power of attorney, but we had to do it at 6 o'clock in the morning before she started drinking. And even then, she still had some carryover from the night before, and it was kind of tricky to make sure that she knew what she was signing and she was of a clear mind.
Yeah, and that's just very scary.
Yeah.
That's very scary for all of us, because you know how liturgic everybody is, so they'll just say, you know, just don't put
What's the
yourself
best way to
in
get a
that
power of
situation.
attorney?
What do you mean?
The title company.
The title
Yes.
company do a power of attorney?
Absolutely. Ours are property specific, it has a language we know we need.
Okay.
And, so that's the best way to do it. If you are in a situation where they have, we have this power of attorney that she signed, get it to us right away. A lot of times it doesn't have the right language we need. A lot of times it's too old. If it's more than 5 years old, I'm gonna tell you right now, we're not gonna take it. It's, you know, we're putting our necks out on the line again.
Our legal will need to,
Approve it, yeah.
approve it.
Yeah.
Well,
And
it's
it's not
fine,
just
and you guys
us.
have one that you guys know is approved by your legal, so
Absolutely.
basically all I
Right.
have to do is put the
Put-
client's names in
Yep.
there.
And it takes us 2 seconds to.
and
And I
have
can have
them,
them go over.
have
send
them
paper out.
prepare it.
Right. Yeah, call us before so we get it ready.
Sure.
But yeah,
Oh, you don't,
Deborah?
yeah, people do that all the time too. It's fine too, but.
My realtor told me I can come by and you can do this for me. Okay.
Yeah, we can.
Who's
We're just
the
like,
realtor?
I know everything. Let me drop what I'm doing.
All right, let's just take a few questions. I know it's right at one. So Deborah, do you have a question?
Okay, so for instance, if you have a seller that knows that, like a husband and wife, and the wife is gonna be taking a trip to Europe, and their house is listed, can we get a power of attorney in case that,
Absolutely.
so
Yep.
that like he can sign for her for negotiations?
Yep, absolutely. Just let us know. Well, I mean, we'll have to pull a deed, so we'll need to know the property address and the names and that kind of stuff, but absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
And we need a copy of that if you're, for our file as well. Deborah, the real estate commission would want a copy of a power of attorney if somebody was signing on somebody's
Right.
behalf like that,
Especially, yeah.
in our own internal file.
Yep.
What other questions? Closing's gone wrong. What did we forget, Bill?
I don't have a question, but on good funds, one of the things that I've run into is people taking money out of an IRA or 401K or some other retirement account, and they do it 2 days before the closing, it won't apply because it doesn't clear.
Right.
And in some cases, if you've got your funds all invested, there has to be some stock that's sold or bonds that have to be sold before they even can generate cash to get that. So you gotta do that well in advance.
And the IRA company will not send the money straight to us.
No, they gotta go to their checking account.
They have to wire the money to their account and then to us, so there's a lot of coordination that needs to go there. I'm glad you brought that up, because we do have that.
I know.
I had a cash closing that came up and, you know, all of a sudden, but your money's not ready.
Yeah.
Your money's not ready, you've known for 2 months, so, but people just don't think these things through, you know? It's just, and there's nothing wrong with that. And can I just talk about dead people real quick?
Dead people.
Dead people.
Let's talk about dead people real quick.
Let us know if you have a person who is deceased people think that it's automatically recorded someplace, and it is not. The death certificate has to be recorded, so we have had situations where one of my very first closings, I went to the closing tables refinance. Hi, Mr. Elderly Man. Where's Mrs. Elderly Woman? Oh, she died. Oh my God, it was terrible. It was terrible. So, I mean, everything had to stop, because, you know, they didn't hold tenants. Whole title is joint tenants. I mean, it was a cluster. So if somebody's dead, let us know, because that could be no problem, it could be a huge problem. So let us know.
Elaine, do you have one more question? Oh, somebody else I thought had their hand up.
I was gonna say, has mineral rights really become a big headache for you?
It has, it really has, and we had a class, and boy, I wish everybody would have gone to that class, including myself, but, you
We'll
know.
build it in Greeley,
if
we
you
have it in Loveland.
Yeah, if you have a lot and lot property, don't not sell or sell because of mineral rights. That's stupid. You've got this little property, you're gonna make $50 over a year maybe.
We call that the Beverly Hills syndrome.
Yes.
Beverly Hillbilly syndrome. Don't be a Beverly Hillbilly, it's actually.
People are just really getting crazy about it, and it's, I mean, if you have a big, you know, you have 100 acres or you have a section or something, sure, I get it. But yeah, people are silly, and we don't do mineral searches. We can't tell you if there's minerals. What we can do is say the seller is reserving or the seller is not reserving. One thing to know though, if the seller wants to keep their mineral rights and you don't notate it in the contract, they automatically go with the property in the warranty deed, automatically.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, and that's happened. I mean, it's happened where we've missed it. It's happened where it just hasn't been disclosed. So let us know. That's, you know, put that in the contract. Just put it in the exclusions. That's the best place to do it.
I've seen where a realtor puts it in the, inclusions and exclusions and the provisions in both places.
The best place is to notate it in an inclusion or exclusion. Well,
It has to be in the contract though.
It needs to be in the
Right,
contract.
just because it's on
Right,
Iris, if you're
including.
anything.
that's right, because we can't look at Iris.
We're not.
But it's
We
excluded.
can't be.
Yeah.
Okay,
Great.
Claire's gonna do her
Great.
part. Thank you so much.